Hello. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Kristen Deshay, Product Strategy Director with Oracle. We're here to talk about infrastructure in the Northeast Corridor, critical transportation route. I've spent 25 years in Washington, D.C. as a writer and come up here many, many times. So it's important to me. It's close to my heart. But it's aging. It faces a lot of challenges of labor shortages and rising material costs and changes in policies and politics that can affect prioritization of projects. But there are lots of opportunities. There are lots of promises in innovation and automation and coordination between local governments and agencies. So I'm very excited to have the panel that we have here today. I think we have the best possible panel to talk about these issues and these challenges. So I'll go ahead and stop and let them introduce themselves and their role and their agency. So Ben, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Okay, this works now. Ben Limmer, I am Chief of Transit for the Connecticut DOT. Been in the public transportation space for over 20 years. Started out in capital planning and project management, and I'm not sure how many times I was in the top 0.5% of my class, as we learned in the opening speech. But we certainly have a huge capital program in front of us, as well as our day-to-day operational oversight. For those of you who do not know, we do have 3 commuter rail lines who we work with our service partners to provide service for, and then we actually have 12 bus transportation agencies, which we manage on a day-to-day basis. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Good morning, everyone. Morteza Farajian, Executive Director at Build America Bureau. And I don't know how many of you have heard about Build America Bureau. And a few, that's good, that's good. We are at U.S. Department of Transportation. If you want to find us, when you go to U.S. Department of Transportation, ground floor, there's a dry cleaner. We are right behind that dry cleaner. And we always say that good transactions happen behind that dry cleaner because we do finance projects, infrastructure projects. And to just give you a sense of how much we are involved in financing infrastructure projects in U.S., just over the last couple of years, on average, we have closed about $10 billion, $8 to $10 billion worth of loans every year for different clients, different projects. We do have about $40 billion worth of loans that we are underwriting right now, and we have over $100 billion in lending capacity, low interest rate, flexible loans that a lot of infrastructure projects are using. One here, Hudson Tunnel, that you have probably heard about it. That's one of the projects that we currently are working on 3 loans for that project. I've been with DOT for about 5 years now as Executive Director at Build America Bureau. We also provide technical assistance. I will talk about it a little bit later. We're trying to build capacity for our local partners, particularly to think outside the box, think about project financing. But prior to joining Build America Bureau, I was Director of P3 office, Public-Private Partnership office in Virginia for about 7 years. You might have heard about some of those P3 projects in Virginia. So most of them, I was involved when I was there in procurement, negotiation, and delivery of those projects. And then for a short period of time, under Governor Northam, I was Deputy Secretary of Transportation in Virginia.
Hi, good morning. I'm Steve Sigmund. I am the Chief of Public Outreach for the Gateway Development Commission, which is the organization building the Hudson Tunnel project that Morteza just mentioned. And I certainly know what the Build America Bureau is because we're applying for a multi-billion-dollar loan from you all. So thanks for being next to me. We can close it in the next 45 minutes. And, you know, I come from 30 years of, right, exactly, of communications and infrastructure, public affairs, including as Chief of Public Affairs for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Thanks for having me.
I'm Lisa Daglian. I'm the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. Our role is to represent the transit riders on the MTA system, New York City's subways, buses, Staten Island Rail, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North. So we interact with riders who transition into Connecticut, who benefit from the loans that you provide, thank you very much, who will maybe one day have a one-seat ride to west of Hudson, thanks to the Gateway tunnels. We work very closely with Jamie, thank you so much. We were created by New York State law by the legislature in 1981 as a result of the fiscal crisis of the 70s to provide recommendations and guidance to the MTA, first on their capital program, and then also into their operating program. And I'm delighted to say that we're doing an analysis, but we have quite a few recommendations that the MTA has, in fact, moved forward with. We are, like the family that came to Thanksgiving dinner one year, nobody quite knows how we're related, but we are related, and we keep coming back, and we're part of the MTA family, and sometimes we get along and sometimes we don't. But we work very closely with the MTA. So I'm really glad to be here, because at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, and in the middle of the day, it's the riders who are going to be affected by, benefit from, or feel the negative results of the investments on the Northeast Corridor. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jamie Torres-Springer. I run the MTA Construction and Development Agency. We were created in 2019, as everyone in the room knows, to consolidate all of the capital programs across the MTA. So we are responsible for delivery of our $55 billion five-year capital program. We just released our 20-year needs assessment, which will take us forward over the next couple of decades, and over the next months and the next year, we'll be producing the next five-year plan, the 25 to 29 plan. Great partnerships with everyone sitting here, and obviously we run the two busiest commuter railroads in the country by far, both of which are on the Northeast Corridor, heavily impacted by the Northeast Corridor. So happy to be part of this conversation.
Thank you all. Stephen, I'll start with you. It's been an exciting year for the Hudson Tunnel project. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about where it stands right now and what risks there are coming at you?
Sure, I'd be happy to, and thanks. I'm actually filling in this morning for my colleague Megan Strickland, so I expected to just sort of sit up here for a little while and answer a question or two. So thanks for starting off
on the
with me.
spot right away.
Oh, good. No, we've had an enormous year, and that's really due to terrific leadership from our governors and from the Biden administration, obviously, and from the Senate Majority Leader and the entire Congress, and that's really been a significant part of what we've tried to do at the Gateway Development Commission, and is building support for the project across like lots and lots of political and stakeholder organizations, which in the previous iteration of this in ARC, it's sort of I was part of that too. The Port Authority, it kind of rolled forward on its own, and when it started to get knocked down politically, it didn't have enough kind of stakeholder support and background, and it hadn't gotten far enough along. And so what we really are concentrating on is getting the project to a point of no return right now, right, in terms of funding, which we've just qualified this year for $11 billion in federal funding, which is the most to any infrastructure project in modern history. In terms of construction, we started construction on both sides of the river this year on early works projects, on the what's called the concrete casing on the New York side and the Tunnelly Avenue Bridge project on the New Jersey side. And we thought it was really important to start those early works projects this year so that there were shovels in the ground this year, indicating that this project is moving forward. And in terms of moving forward with the state's commitments through the Build America Bureau and the RIF loans, moving that process forward into the creditworthiness phase and the review phase that we're going through a very intense process with the Build America Bureau right now. So the whole point is to move all of those systems and programs forward now so that you never again can be in a position where the politics can kill, essentially, a project that has been needed for 30 years for, just as Lisa said, the 800,000 people who use the Northeast Corridor and the 200,000 people who use this tunnel every single day and rely on it to get back and forth to work, to home, to travel, and rely on it to be on time and reliable, which it isn't right now. So that's why we're doing this project, and that's what we've tried to move forward aggressively this year.
Thanks, Stephen. Speaking of large capital projects, Jamie, you mentioned the 20-year needs assessment that just came out. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's come out of that?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I think it is particularly for operating transit agencies, but also those that are undertaking mega projects. It's an important approach that we've taken. We went and took a step back and inventoried our 6 million assets that we think are worth about $1.5 trillion. And then, figured out what sort of state of good repair they're in, but also looked ahead to future challenges, aging infrastructure, the impacts of climate change, and also changing customer preferences, and really sort of laid out the path for how we're going to keep all of those assets in a state of good repair and also improve them, including priorities we share with PCAC and many others in terms of ADA accessibility, and modernization of a lot of our systems. So that's really pointing the way. I might just say, since we're having a Northeast Corridor conversation, I think it's an amazing time to be working on rail infrastructure in the country. Lots of great announcements and lots of fun, tens of billions of dollars being made available. Fed-state partnership awards last week were great for many of the projects we're talking about. We were gratified. The Biden administration funded almost 100% of the Penn Station at Metro North Penn Station Access Project, which is bringing Metro North into Penn Station along Amtrak's Hellgate line and creating 4 new stations in the East Bronx, we didn't wait for the grant award, which, depending on how last week went, could have been looked at as quite a gamble. But so we're into construction. I'm happy to talk about how that's going. But that's really important. And I would just say that I really think that we're sort of in some ways the test case, because we're undertaking the 3, I think, most advanced capital projects on the Northeast Corridor and have been for some time, which is the reconstruction of Herald Interlocking over the course of the last couple of decades, Penn Station Access, which I described, and then work on the reconstruction of Penn Station, for which we have lots of planning going on. We have to think about how Gateway comes into to West Midtown. That's really important, but we have gone ahead and rebuilt the Long Island Railroad concourse on 33rd Street, and the associated infrastructure as much as we could, which is really on the Northeast Corridor. And the experiences of those 3 projects, I think, are telling and important for how these other projects move forward on the corridor as well. I'm happy to talk about that further.
Thank you. Morteza, can we go to you and talk a little bit about the funding of these projects and the Infrastructure Accelerator Program and alternative delivery models?
Sure, I'll be happy to talk about that. So you heard about Hudson Tunnel, $11 billion in terms of funding that's already in place, but there's still a gap of, I believe it's another $5-6 billion, $7 billion, depending on what the final cost is. So, can you guys hear me? Is this better? Okay, great. So, where we help is we step in and try to close that gap, especially for projects that don't have access to all of that funding, all of the cash up front. For some of these large projects, you can imagine how difficult it is to have $16, $17, $18 billion to get the projects done. And not every project is Hudson Tunnel, but we're also hearing other projects that these days a $1 billion project is not that big enough, right? There are a lot of projects out there that go above $1 billion. So what we do is we try to help project sponsors to leverage the resources and borrow against future resources that they may have to build a project today and save on construction cost escalation. We all know about almost 10%, 12% construction cost escalation over the last couple of years. The rates that we have when we close our loans, now that they are a little bit higher than 2 years ago, we're still around 4.5%. So that just tells you that every year that the project sponsor tries to leverage their resources, borrow, and get the project done faster, by default, they're saving 5, 6, 7% just under the difference between construction cost escalation and financing costs. But some project sponsors are getting even more innovative. They try to, for example, bundle different projects to create economy of scale. Some of them, instead of phasing their projects, they're trying to finance phase 2 and build it with phase 1 to save on some of the inefficiencies that phasing causes because of paying for mobilization, demobilization, some of those soft costs that you will pay twice, as well as managing two different contracts, two different procurements that by default increases the cost of the project. So we see more and more of those activities happening. And of course, public-private partnership, bringing private entities on board, trying to get projects done with alternative delivery models, that's another aspect. But to get any of these things done, what's the number one thing that project sponsors need to have? They need to have capacity. You just heard about Gateway project. Gateway project would have not happened if an organization like GDC was not in place to be the quarterback, to bring everyone together, to advance some of these studies, to bring people on board who know how to get these projects done. And that's what we're trying to do at local level, to make sure that project sponsors build that capacity so they can think outside the box. They can think about some of these alternative delivery models, some of these efficiencies that they can create when they are packaging their projects, procuring their projects, funding and financing their projects through a couple of grant programs that we have. So I talked about our loans that a lot of people know about our loan programs. I don't need to sell them, telling you that they are at treasury rate. We can structure them in a way that you don't have to make any payments for about 10 years after we close the loan. No prepayment penalties. And I can go on and on about the benefits that can save probably about 20 to 40% compared to other available resources in the market, and they can go 75 years, up to 75 years at fixed rate. That's something that doesn't even exist in market anywhere else. But again, to be able to use those programs in the right way for the right projects, capacity is really the biggest challenge that a lot of project sponsors are dealing with. The grant programs we have, one of them is called Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program. We have so far created 24 of those. It just started 3 years ago. We have gone through 3 rounds, a very successful program. First round, we just had $5 million. We created 5 of them. Second round, $5 million. We created 5 of them. Third round, we had $24 million. Congress gave us more money because it's successful. Everything is working out. And we created 14 of those. And these are units at local level that are getting money from us with no strings attached to that money, except for hire the right people, build capacity, hire the right advisors, and try to focus at local level on projects and try to evaluate what other options do you have outside of that traditional way that you have always used to plan these projects and build them. Like what I said, it's very new, but it's working. We just had all the 24 accelerate, except for one of them, 23 of them in DC, because we try to get them together, have a summit so they can talk among themselves. It's like a support group that they come together. Oftentimes they think that, my project is moving so slow. I'm just trying to move mountains. It's so difficult to get these projects done. But when they come together and they talk about the same challenges that they're all dealing and learn from each other's challenges and each other's solutions, that's how good ideas emerge, and it's working for us. So that's very, very good program we have. We have another one that the notice of funding opportunity for it is going to go out soon. It's called Innovative Finance and Asset Concession Technical Assistance Program. Congress has given us $100 million, again, grants that we are going to give to public agencies, particularly transit agencies, I think are best suited to take advantage of this program. That money is to hire advisors to do what we call asset scanning. It's not just about the new projects that we want to build, right? And projects that we already have in our plans. It's also about what assets do you have that are underutilized, but you can utilize them in a better way. And a lot of public entities, they may have an idea about some of those assets, but they have not gone through a systematic way of analyzing them. For example, a surface parking lot right next to a transit station. Is it a good asset for mixed-use development that the station can win because dense development around the station is going to increase ridership on the station and generate more revenue for the station? The municipality is going to win because they're going to collect property taxes. The same number of parking spots can be provided to the project, to the transit station after the project is built, so we're not losing any parking. But also, private sector can get involved and make money off of this development. A win-win scenario that everyone is going to win. And those are the type of assets that we are interested to identify, and many of them exist. And this can also create maybe a land lease for the transit agency, some sort of maybe revenue sharing from the project that's going to support them. But to get that done, first we need to help our partners to do an asset scan, to bring the right people on board, look at the conditions of that asset and figure out whether it makes sense or not. Put basic information together about those assets in a database that we are going to collect this data and we're going to publicly share it. So everyone else can have access to it. So as a private developer, you can just go to this database, have the basic information you need to build your business case, to make sure that it makes sense. And then you have a point of contact listed on the database that you know who to contact for more conversations so the deal can happen. So those are the type of things that we have to help build capacity and build new opportunities that will be a win-win opportunity for everyone.
That's great, thank you. Ben, I saw you nodding your head on some of those. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, let's move to Connecticut. What are the major investments going on for you and how are you guys improving the passenger experience?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for the question, and that was a good segue. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, you know, of course, like many on the stage, we are juggling our day-to-day operational challenges with also working on a railroad that is in need of many repairs to make it safer and faster and all those things. Jamie's spot on. It's certainly a great time to be working on many of these capital programs. Of course, we all know about the federal support that we have been recipients of over the last couple of years. Most recently, the state of Connecticut, as well as Amtrak, received $2 billion to upgrade the Northeast Corridor, which I will go into a little bit more detail than that. And then, of course, managing our capital assets on our 3 commuter rail lines. So it's certainly great news to know that the grant program is coming, and I suspect we will take 2 looks at it. Certainly going forward, the governor's top priority is to save time on the trip from New Haven into Grand Central. The goal is to save 25 minutes by 2035, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a significant savings for a trip that can take as little as 100 minutes, but sometimes a little bit longer than that. But 25 minutes by 2035, sometimes don't have the guts to tell them that we might need to move a little bit slower before we can go faster. So wish me luck with that conversation. But we're certainly looking at as many near-term service and speed enhancements as we possibly can. Of course, we partnered with Metro North on a super express train service. We also invested ourselves in new rail cars called M8s. Our second category with the time for CT is, of course, future rail cars. So we're finalizing a purchase for 6 dual modes as well as 60 rail cars to use on the Hartford line, New Haven line, and many of the branches. Then, of course, the third and big category is the investments in the capital infrastructure. I mentioned the $2 billion grants. We have 4 bridges within the state that are all over 100 years old, so we're working one by one to replace those. The Walk Bridge is under construction today. We received a letter of intent to fund the full construction of the Devon Bridge. Then, of course, we're working on the Saugatuck Bridge and the Coscott Bridge as well. So the bridges are the big thing. We're also looking at as many railroad enhancements as possible to increase the overall speed. So a lot more to come there. As far as how we prioritize, Jamie and myself both sit and work with the Northeast Corridor Commission. We're going through many exercises to resource load and look at schedules, and it's really going to be an all-hands effort as we really work together to identify all of the resources. Many of you in this room can support with that, of course, and looking forward to that conversation.
Thank you. As a commuter and as somebody who loves public transportation, 25 minutes makes a big difference. That's huge. That's exciting. And Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about rider experience and specifically what are the biggest challenges to bring riders back after the COVID? And what is your vision for this full fare integration?
Sure, thank you. Well, you know, we've heard a lot about the leadership that it takes to get all of this work done. And the MTA and the riders the millions of riders who are coming back wouldn't be benefiting from the service improvements and the service increases that we are experiencing if it wasn't for the leadership of the governor, the legislature, who really moved money to ensure that we are fully funded operationally for the next 5 years, which is, I've never been so happy to see a bunch of zeros in a budget. It's amazing. Now we're fighting for the capital program to make sure that congestion pricing gets over the finish line. That's a big political fight that we're still in the middle of. It's, what is it, a quarter, a third of the capital program of this capital program, and it's delaying some projects now that Jamie is masterminding how to not delay more, but showing the commitment and the leadership to transit and transit riders from the governor, the legislature, the MTA, the leadership, and the advocacy community who's really banded together, not just locally, but nationally, to focus on transit improvements, service improvements, I'm out, but thank you. And to ensure that the eye stays on the prize of safe, reliable, efficient, effective, and continuously better service is what's going to help. So, you know, there was a big campaign this year about 6-minute service. If there was 6-minute service on my line, it would be a step down because I get like 2 to 3 minute service. So, you know, really focusing on investing in improving signals, ensuring that they're over 100 years old in some cases, right? Ensuring that the rails don't break, ensuring that that there's funding for capital projects, ensuring that, you know, we've got Long Island Railroad coming into Grand Central. Some people are now taking that for granted, but it was a big deal, and it's a beautiful station, and if anybody hasn't been there, go there. It's just amazing, and it's just walk around and take a ride to Jamaica and use the $5 fare. It's called City Ticket. That came out of our office as one of the advocacy initiatives that we promoted, $7 on peak. But we're hoping to restore, that's within the city, hence the name. But we're hoping to restore something called City Ticket Weekly, which was initially for the southern, it was to Atlantic Terminal only. It was called Atlantic Ticket and Atlantic Ticket Weekly. But because of the expansion of City Ticket and capacity concerns, there were some understandable questions about whether demand would be, whether there would be too many people riding at the lower fare. So now that Jamie has taken over the Omni program, which is the tap card program, I should have brought my prop with me, and accelerating that hopefully to the commuter trains as well, we are looking really for fare simplification and fare integration on the railroads, so it's a seamless trip. So that if you're going from Patchogue to Wassaic on Metro North, that it doesn't seem like you need to get 2 different tickets. That you can, well, right now you get 2 tickets through the app, but it's not really a seamless tap. You have to go in and it's a machination. Or if you go to a machine, there are 2 physical tickets that look exactly the same, but we think that they could look different. We'd like it to be as seamless as possible so that people just think, hey, I'm just riding on one railroad, because that's what the MTA is. That's what Omni is. It's one, what is it? One something New York, right? Yes. Yeah, right. One Metro New York. But there's been some COVID-related issues with the rollout. Transit, getting it into transit stations, the machines, has been a challenge, which is why Jamie's group has taken it over and really accelerated it. When it comes into the commuter rails, we think that there's a host of opportunities for improving fare discounts, for really making it a more seamless trip and simplifying the fare structure between Long Island Railroad and Metro North, because it's just very convoluted. It's legacy. It's based on 100-year-old railroads that were all different systems on Metro North that came together on the Long Island Railroad, and making them really be one system so that riders don't, feel like they're doing different trips and beyond. There's an opportunity to integrate with New Jersey Transit. We now have a system with Connecticut DOT because Metro North rides there. We have a system with New Jersey Transit because if you ride on west of Hudson service, you have to change trains, but you start on New Jersey Transit and then it magically turns into a Metro North train. We're hoping that we'll have a one-seat ride when Gateway comes, but there's not a way to tap and to make it a really seamless trip. Penn Station is something that we, as rider advocates for the Long Island Railroad commuters, are very supportive of improving the station now and talking about what we can do to make it better, but not hesitating. They who hesitate sometimes get lost. So let's do what we're doing now and continue the conversation. That could lead very well to a through running opportunity, which we would love to see. But we also have to consider how through financing is going to work. How are the agencies all going to manage their funds so that the MTA doesn't get stuck with the burden of an agency, not CONDOT, that doesn't invest in transit and JT as much as the MTA does. So from the rider perspective, things are absolutely better. Bringing people back has to ensure safe, reliable, efficient, effective, accessible, equitable service.
Thank you. Jamie, do you want to touch on any of those projects and those challenges that Lisa mentioned, or other projects that are focused on the rider experience?
Sure. Well, first I have to say, just in response to Lisa mentioning that everyone should go to visit Grand Central Madison, I'm assuming in this room, 2/3 of the people probably worked on Grand Central Madison, including, I do want to acknowledge Rob Troop. I hope he's still back there. Maybe he stepped out for a minute, but our project executive who delivered that project, and great to see him now on the conference circuit here. He should really be up here talking about how we actually get things done. There's a lot to respond to. I think just because we're talking about the Northeast Corridor, I'd just say, in many ways, because of the efforts of the Biden administration, Build America Bureau, and many others, funding and financing are complicated, but they're probably not the biggest problem right now. The biggest problem is the ability to deliver on these projects, and there's sort of two aspects of it. I think we've touched on it a little bit, both Connecticut and Gateway. One thing is how we build the capacity of the owner and project sponsor entities to actually deliver. We're really pleased with the work that we've been able to do, moving to design build where appropriate, where we have a different allocation of risk between owner and contractor. Although we also are relying on design bid build in an A+B model to incentivize work where appropriate, and building up our project management capacity, incentivizing consultants, and including many in this room. And I know consultants are, our partners are not always happy with the outcomes of that, but we think it's very important that we move to a better allocation of risk. But on the corridor, the real problem is how we manage to support the delivery of work. And I think, it's certainly, Ben and I spent a lot of time on the Northeast Corridor Commission talking about this. Gateway, fortunately, is a little bit out of the right-of-way in a lot of cases, at least for the tunneling work for the time being. And for that, I really envy you because the level of force account support, the ability to grant outages, and the ability to manage work is the biggest inhibitor of achieving progress on the Northeast Corridor. It's not any one entity's fault. it's because we haven't invested in the Northeast Corridor at these levels ever. And so there's no reason to believe that we should have the track foreman, the ET linemen, the power directors, the catenary car operators hired and trained and certified to be able to support that work. A lot of that, and I'm not shy about saying it, is Amtrak's responsibility to provide force account support, and they are really committed. They're doing a great job. I always commend my friend and colleague Laura Mason, who stood up a great program there to deliver capital for Amtrak, and they are trying to build up that level of force account support, but it's not a muscle that they have the memory of. And so we simply, at each turn in Harold, on Penn Station access, we'll see it in Connecticut, we'll see it on portions of Gateway that are directly on the corridor. New Jersey is seeing it now. Do not have the ability to deliver work in a timely and cost-effective way because we cannot manage the outages and support the work. And that is the biggest problem that we all need to find a way to confront. There are solutions, and I think those in this room, work all across the country and around the world, and you can bring solutions in terms of where we rely on third parties, how we develop best practices, how we engage in safe activity, but make sure that we can do it in an efficient way. All of these things have to be brought to bear, and there is tremendous urgency to this because we're about to see billions and billions of dollars invested in the Northeast Corridor, and the improvements like 25-minute reductions, the improvements that Amtrak is seeking, and that are such a priority for the president. Those things will only happen if we find a way to support work across the corridor. So that is really the #1 problem that we need to deal with.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to react to that for a minute, and thanks, Jamie. I think something you said was really important, both to the Gateway project and the projects all of you are doing, is the notion of muscle memory, right? That a lot of this hasn't been done for a really long time. So for our project, for example, look, we have the advantage, as Jamie said, of not being on the right-of-way, which was done on purpose, that the new tunnel is getting dug off the existing Northeast Corridor and next to it and adjacent to it on purpose, so that you, because as everyone has said, minutes matter, and the people who are riding those trains every day right now, the 800,000 people who rely on the Northeast Corridor, cannot have delays over 10 years while this project gets built. But the other aspect of it is that there has been no new tunnel dug for 113 years. So there is no muscle memory there. We have to rely on people who have done similar kinds of work and can get this work done. And also, you're now going through new areas, right? So we're going to be 80 to 250 feet underground, for example, in the Palisades, but you still have to buy the rights of way, the ground rights, essentially, of all the properties that are on top of the Palisades. There's like 113 properties there. And not only is that a cost, but it adds enormous complication, right? Because you have to get those right-of-ways purchased before you can dig underneath them. So there are all, at every single step of projects like this, we have to sort of build new muscle memory so that we learn, not just do them and get them done, but learn how to do them so that those 800,000 people are benefited in the decades to come.
Just got a couple more minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to talk fast this time. I'm a New Yorker. The other thing that we look at too is still doing a lot of sandy work, right? And that's still affecting the system. It's still affecting tunnels, obviously. But the next step is also East River tunnels, and that's going to happen concurrently. So there's more tunnels that are going to be built with more muscle memory that needs to happen, and a lot more that's going to happen under your assistance and oversight and outages, and that's going to also affect how riders work. But hopefully that's going to allow Amtrak to eventually consider another route, maybe one day. Well, they're looking at it apparently. But these are all, the more money, the more work, the better for all of us, especially including riders and everybody here. But it's a lot, and it's just going to be very inconvenient for a lot of people. So figuring out how to make that less inconvenient, I think, is also a particular challenge.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, musical microphones. Just to pile on a little bit, the three major projects that Jamie mentioned are critically important to the state of Connecticut, stating the obvious, and then also the four big bridges I mentioned and all the other railroad upgrades that we are trying to make. But juggling all the resources, of course, while we're still trying to maintain day-to-day operations as much as we can, is a huge challenge, but certainly one that we are absolutely trying to minimize. So how do you work on all of that at once while still providing much-needed rail service and connections to our state? So that's kind of the big elephant in the room as well. And then complicating factors, the two busiest rail stations within the state of Connecticut, we are also completely renovating with TODs next door, all new station platforms, canopies, transportation centers, et cetera. So it's going to be a tremendous challenge and one that we're certainly up for.
This is a great conversation, but unfortunately we are out of time. So I want to say thank you to all of the panelists and feel free to have a conversation with them after.
Thank you all, appreciate it.